Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com.
June 17th, John Eliot.
When dreams are delayed, don't give up. God will come through. One crisp October day in 1646, John Eliot and his friends tramped 4 miles from his house toward the Indian village on Nanantum Hill. When the Puritans had fled religious persecution in England to establish a church in the New World, they also committed to serve as missionaries to the natives. And John had often dreamed about bringing the truth of the gospel to them. But it had taken more than 15 years for John to establish his own home and learn the natives' language. Finally, today, the God-given dream would happen. Isaiah 46:10 says, "And don't forget the many times I clearly told you what was going to happen in the future. For I am God, I only, and there is no other like me who can tell you what is going to happen. All I say will come to pass, for I do whatever I wish." Eliot and his friends reached the principal wigwam, and several chief men of the village welcomed the visitors in English. Eliot was honored by how graciously they used the few words of English they knew. Today would test how well he could communicate in their language. He stepped into the gloom of a large square room where multiple fires burned. There were vents through the roof, but pungent smoke filled the air. Men, women, and children lined the walls. What a glorious sight. John fought back emotion so he could speak, and he spoke. Occasionally, he needed the help of an interpreter, but it was obvious his audience wanted to hear the words from his own mouth, so he did his best. He explained what God considered to be right and wrong. Then he showed how no one could behave perfectly every single day. Then he said that Jesus was the only way to recover from this hopeless inability to please God. The people were attentive, and John taught for an hour and a half. Finally, he asked if anyone had questions. A man stood up and said, "How may we come to know Jesus Christ?" John explained that the story of Jesus was in the Bible. But since the Indians couldn't read English words, they should meditate on what he had told them because it was from God's book. "Do this much and often," said John. He encouraged them to think about it when they lay on their mats in their wigwams, and when they went into the fields, and when they walked in the woods. Then he told them to pray and say, "Lord, make me to know Jesus Christ, for I know him not." Another man said he had tried to pray, but his friend said God couldn't understand Indian prayers. John explained that God made all men, English and Indian. Since he had made them, he could understand them. Another man stood and said, "Were Englishmen ever this ignorant of God and Jesus Christ as they were?" John perceived the root of the question. "There are 2 sorts of Englishmen. Some are bad and live wickedly," said John. "These kinds of Englishmen didn't know Jesus. But there were a second sort of Englishmen who turned away from wrong behavior and looked to Jesus for help. They are good men now," said John, "and know Christ and love Christ and pray to Christ." More than 3 hours passed. John asked the Indians if they were weary, but they wanted to hear more. John thought it would be good to leave them with a hunger for spiritual things, so he stopped, but promised to come back again. As John walked home, he praised God that his dream to teach the natives of the New World was finally beginning to unfold. What dream has God given you? When dreams are delayed, don't give up. God will come through.
Fellas, I'm Sayla Brown, the daughter of Justin Brown. Today is June 17th, and today's story is about John Eliot.
Yeah, the story, the part of the story that stuck out to me was that John Eliot had to actually wait a long time for him to be able to fulfill the dream he had for bringing the gospel to the Native Americans in the New World. And throughout that time, he had to take care of certain priorities, and God sometimes has priorities for us to take care of before we actually fulfill additional priorities outside our household. He had to take care of his own household, and he also learned the language of the Native Americans. And I think we need to watch how we go about evangelizing, and make sure that we tend to the priorities of our household, the priorities already has in place for us before we actually pursue the dreams that he plants within us.
Going off of that, sometimes if you really feel that God is putting that dream in your heart and it just seems like you can't get it done or it's not happening right now, don't get discouraged, because like he said, it took John Eliot 15 years before his dream actually came true. So instead of getting discouraged and feeling like this is never going to happen, if you truly feel that that's God's will for you to do, then use that time wisely, like John Eliot did, learning the language and learning his facts about God so that he could answer all the Indians' questions.
So our challenge to you is to continually strive to figure out what those dreams are. Those dreams are placed into you by God, and don't be discouraged, like my son said, to wait and patiently for God in His time, His perfect timing, to fulfill those dreams. We thank you and have a good day.
Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com. Get your free strategy session valued at $1,000. Get expert advice and take your business to the next level. Visit lighthousepowerbusiness.com to schedule your session today.